Let me begin by first conveying my heartfelt thanks to the organizers of the 4th edition of the Global Congress on Gender and Sexuality for having me as one of the keynote speakers here today. It's really an honor and privilege. I speak to you from Bengaluru, Karnataka, that is a state in South India. And I'm going to be talking to you about a current research project of mine, which looks at gender and forced migration, the politics of silence, and the voice and agency of Myanmar refugees in India. Let me first take you to my current field. As you can see in the map there for you, for India and Southeast Asia, you can see bordering India in the northeast is the red, the little state of Myanmar, which we know since February 2021 has been under a military coup. Ever since then, we have particularly had thousands and thousands of refugees fleeing the violence and the kind of political conflict there being particularly perpetrated by the military junta in Myanmar. And they are fleeing to what you see in the next picture across that red international boundary onto the states of, say, Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur, and Mizoram. My work looked at what are the protection risks and needs of the refugees who are particularly coming into Manipur, Mizoram, and New Delhi. It was a 6-month study, and we've just completely submitted our reports to our funders. I want to state right at the outset that all the pictures that I'm sharing here today have been taken with the consent of the respondents, but I have also asked the organizers that as I'm making my presentation like a photo essay, can we not please disseminate the PowerPoint because it's not for public dissemination. When we do write the paper and publish it, that's a separate thing, but the pictures are not for public dissemination. And I definitely want to put down the point about consent. We know that India shares a 1,643-kilometer long stretch of a land boundary with Myanmar, as you can see that red part on the side. But this has been a very porous and a contentious boundary. For decades now, Myanmarese refugees have been coming and crossing over to India, and India has been a very welcome host to them. In fact, but this got a little bit complicated in the last couple of months because while the military in Myanmar has been attacking and they've been burning their villages and the people are fleeing, some of those bombings, in fact, even hit the Indian side in Mizoram. And the picture at the bottom, in fact, is a Farkawan village on the India-Myanmar border, where people who fled from Myanmar, they sit there and they're collecting donated clothes at a temporary distribution center in Mizoram. And on the other side, right across those hills, is the Myanmar country for you. Now, for today, I shall focus particularly of all the 100 intensive interviews that we did covering the length and breadth of the states, particularly going to those remote border villages. I want to bring to you the stories of the women refugees who had to flee, leaving behind their homes, their lands, their livelihoods, their families, everything, many of them with not even their documents, and cross over to the Indian side. Now, when any refugee leaves his or her country of nationality and comes over to another country, you're already marginalized, you're definitely vulnerable, and you're silenced because you are there at the mercy of the country which is hosting you. You're at the mercy of all your rights for the international protection regime to give them to you. But women, we know, under the burden of patriarchy, under the social conditions that we live in, women always anyways keep quiet. And when they're in a country which is not their own, we see what happens is called the politics of silence and the politics of double marginalization. Here we are in Langcham village, a remote village in the border of Manipur and Myanmar. On the other side of this village, in fact, immediately lies the Myanmar border. And the women tell us that at night, they're so scared because they have fled their burning homes and come running into this side of the Indian border. And at night, they can even still then hear the firing. There are times when bullets even come and scrape into the thatched walls of these houses. And they just lay shivering at night, wondering what they're going to do And will the military, in fact, from the other side, come and run over and come and, get them back? Or is the Indian military or is the Indian state going to deport them back? Or is the police going to come and arrest them? At this point, let me now just also highlight for everyone that India does not have a national refugee law. We are neither signatories to the 1951 UN Convention on Refugees. And so there is no national framework of accountability within which refugee rights lie. All refugees on Indian soil, those whose boundaries are not with India. In fact, there are some whom the Indian government, I don't want to get into those technicalities today because we're looking at the women's side of it. There are some groups who are taken care of by the Indian government, and there are some who are taken care of by the UNHCR, which has two offices, one in Delhi and one in Chennai. And the Myanmarese refugees, in fact, come under the burden of the UNHCR. But when it comes to Northeast India, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees does not have an office there. And it is not even allowed access to go into those regions to help the people there. So these refugees are totally at the mercy of their state government, whether the people there will take care of them or will they be sent back. And in most of these border villages, all these refugees who ethnically and racially are completely similar to the Kukis, the ethnic tribal Kuki clans who live in Manipur. And so they kind of mix within them, but they are living in hiding because they don't know when the police will come and arrest them or maybe send them back. I showed this particular picture because the lady in the checked shirt, while we were speaking, I could make out, and any person who's a field investigator can, that she was not feeling very comfortable to speak. And so from that open area where people were coming and speaking to us, we gathered the women, around 20-25 of them, into a separate secluded area for what we call a focused group discussion, so that the women feel safer and amongst their own, they can speak out a lot more about themselves and what they have gone through. And in the focus group discussion that we then had, there were only stories of molestation, violence. A couple of them accepted that there was sexual and gender-based violence. And they were living there in that little village quietly with no help and no support at all, especially no mental health support, no SGBV support. The little baby that you see swaddled in the yellow cloth, in fact, was given birth to in that village because they don't have any identity cards. And without that, they feel scared to step out onto the roads and even try to make the journey to the government hospitals. And the women there delivered that little baby girl themselves. So there's not even access to public health care. And so what do these women talk to us? They talk to us when a person like me or a researcher like me manages to get to them and give them that safe space where they can share their stories, that they are able to come out of their politics of silence. India is a huge country, overpopulated, economy going up and down. We are barging ahead towards a Amrit Kal, which our Honorable Prime Minister tells us, where we are going to see a lot of prosperity. Still, there are so many millions who are also below the poverty line in our own country. So in a country which is still even trying to handle poverty and marginalization of its own, do you think that we actually have the space and the resources to entertain a conversation about the rights and the needs of those who are coming from other countries and staying on our soil? Let's also remember that there has been a politics of expediency, if I may say. There are some refugee groups who have been treated differently vis-a-vis other refugee groups. When the Tibetan refugees came in the 1950s, Jawaharlal Nehru, along with the Dalai Lama, when they first came in, Jawaharlal Nehru welcomed them with open arms. Because they say, as the great Indian thinker Chanakya had said, your enemy's enemy is your friend. And we were fighting the Chinese wars with China. And so Tibet is China's enemy. And so people fleeing from Tibet were openly welcomed. And Tibetan refugees in North and South India have been given land, have been allowed to, do jobs, and they're living quite well. On the other hand, after the assassination of a former Prime Minister, Rajiv Gandhi, Sri Lankan Tamil refugees were thrown into prison-like conditions in camps in Tamil Nadu, because one of the suspected assassins was from a LTTE militant group of Sri Lanka. And so in this politics of disparity and expediency, what happens is that groups which do not really get the attention become even more silenced, become even more marginalized. And we all know that vis-a-vis men, women still are way below the latter. And so women refugees face this politics of silence and double marginalization. We were very grateful to get access to the Kuki Women's Human Rights Office, and Nengo Kat, who's the president there, and in her office, she stood with us. She's a great rights activist, and she had her KHWRO office on the other side of Myanmar for years. But then when she knew that the military forces there could be coming for her, they destroyed all their files, they destroyed all their office furniture and everything, and just with whatever little bit of materials that they could carry and their documents. Cat has set up its own office in Moray, and its members spoke to us of their plans in 2023 to hold discussion.
Professor Tanu, if you can hear us?
I can't hear anything either. It's as if the talk has frozen.
Yes, I think we've lost connection.
Small break.
You are mute.
I'm so sorry, the Wi-Fi just crashed for a brief second. Is everyone able to hear me and view the screen now?
Yes, we can hear you, ma'am.
If someone can just give me a thumbs up sign.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're good to go.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much. It's raining torrentially here, and the Wi-Fi is a bit unstable. I'm so sorry for that. So KWHRO tells us that they are aware that the victims of domestic violence there are scared of having state forces around them all the time. And so they do not have the confidence to come up and speak. They said that they were aware that the Myanmarese refugee women had faced sexual violence, and they must be thus in need of support. They said that they're talking to invite them to their office on how they could do activities together to help the victims. And Nengokat, the president of the KWHRO, in fact, spoke of how in their areas they received 50 cases in the last 2 years post-coup of gender-based violence for support, and most of them don't even know where they can get service, as only for a small number of people, and they know that they are aware of KWHRO. So they spoke that they need greater state and institutional support for gender-based protection and needs. A few respondents, in fact, when we were speaking about gender-based violence in the previous slide, which I said, in the focus group discussion, they were very keen that if there is some mental health support that they can get, they would be happy for that. The picture on the other side of the screen The picture on the other side of the screen is of the president of the Kuki Students Union. Even the students' unions and groups and CBOs and CSOs come together to help all these refugees, particularly the women in this area. But the most important thing that they need when they come over to the inside is first, of course, what they say, habitat, a home, a roof above your head. We traveled again to another border village and across many paddy fields, across many, lanes, crossing a little river to go into this village where we found Myanmarese refugees living quietly in hiding amongst the locals. There was a village chieftain who particularly had taken a loan from the bank to build special huts for them, because the first thing they need is a space above their head.
Bad internet connection, and we are moving to the next session from Tanju Tanjon and the Institute of Technology and Management, University from India. It's time to share the screen and start the session. Tanju, can you please unmute?
I am so sorry for this. I don't know why the internet is hanging continuously.
When you're running,
Yeah, I don't know why the internet is hanging at my end continuously. So this is how they stay. These are the conditions in which they live. This lady particularly gave me her testimony and gave our team and spoke to us about how middle of the night, the military officers had come circling their house and their village with rifles, demanding that each one of them run and flee. And she took her husband and 2 little boys, and they fled in the middle of night with nothing on them. They neither had any money nor any documentation, nothing. And they are here now, dependent on the mercy of the villagers for their life and livelihood. The women particularly talk about their tales of trauma, because they are the ones who keep the house together. They are the ones who stay in the house when the men used to go out to work. And they were the ones who were most at the brunt of all the violence by the junta in Myanmar. We've heard tales of sexual gender-based violence. We've heard tales of children being taken away. We've heard tales of men being taken away. And this is the space that we need to give to them to create a safe space where they can receive some support and succor for all that they have gone through. And here is another picture of us in one of those villages in Manipur. Now, we always wonder about the basic rights of our own citizens. So do we even bother to ask the women and the children and the men of countries, refugees from other countries, when they come on into our soil, that do you have any, do you even have any, or do you have any what we call needs? And what is the first thing that we think of? Here we are in another village in the border, and we were doing a focus group discussion, this time mixed of women and men and young boys and girls. And while we took the testimonies of each one of them individually, asking them about how they had come, how are they placed here, what are they doing? I'm sure you can see this very bright old lady with white hair in a purple top. Just towards the end, and we were using double translators and interpreters that day in the field, because people were speaking in the Koki language, and then they had another dialect. She told the interpreter to tell me that, can I please just simply say what I think we all need? And we said yes. And her point was that we only need a school. We have fled with nothing but our children. We don't know whether we can go back. Can we have a space where all our younger kids, the next generation, can at least know that they can study, and more importantly, they can be safe in another space and they can be there. And we know that our next generation is also getting education and schooling. So the biggest thing that they need is a space. We do find that in the government schools for the Myanmari refugees in Delhi, but definitely lacking in the remote villages in the border areas of Manipur and Mizoram. What happens to the education of these children, of these women who have fled their homes and come into India? In this village, we saw a very, very humble and a noble village chieftain, an Indian Manipuri village chieftain, who particularly has set up 3 houses, which he calls a refugee school, which later on in the evening, the people there come and bring in all the refugee children, and on their own, their own human resources, they just teach the refugee children, because they don't even know the language. And if they can know a little bit of English, they can know the basic, stuffs that they are losing out on. And they can maybe next year or the year after that, try to go to the other government schools. So there are some villages where the village chiefs have started their own village schools for the refugee children. This is a fascinating story, which we in our report have called, what in the advocacy and NGO literature, we call the most significant stories, the MSS. Dr. Myo Mint and Dr. So Mint, a couple, are Burmese partners. They are PhD holders, having earned their degree from Japan. Both were in fact teaching in Mandalay University. When the coup took place, they both became CDM teachers, and due to their involvement, they had to escape because they were part of the civil disobedience movement. They decided to come to India as it was a democratic country, and they had very high hopes for support India and Indians towards Myanmar's democracy and aspiration for democratic values. Both are currently asylum seekers. In India, they do not have UNHCR registration, as will have to be in Delhi for that, nor do they have any proper paperwork. Both are known by the Indian authorities to be there in Moreh. They face personal threats of arbitrary arrest and deportation, including that of their small child of 5 years, who could be handed over to the hands of the Burmese military. Yet both have taken personal interest in the well-being of the displaced Burmese children who are at the More border villages to provide them with some form of education. They both together have managed to raise small funds and set up a temporary school where the children are coming together for education. Their school currently is recognized by the deposed NUG Ministry of Education in the border areas of India, where the children are now getting even education in Burmese curricula and will be recognized by the ministry to graduate into the next level without any hindrance or military junta's intervention into the ongoing education of the young children who are losing out on their opportunity of education. And that is one stellar story that we see with this couple, particularly with the lady, the wife whom we see here, who is totally in charge of running the school. And she's a refugee herself. We, of course, those who are aware of Indian politics, we know that there is a different story of the women who are refugees in Manipur versus Mizoram, and that is more because of the political configuration of these two states. Manipur state is being run by a coalition of the BJP party, which is also ruling the state and is ruling at the center. It is militarized. There is huge anti-outsider sentiment. And in fact, for all of us following Indian news, we know that since May 3rd, there has been terrible violent unrest in that state. Manipur, in fact, only has around a burden of, say, 5,000 Myanmarese refugees, but there are also refugees in detention camps and prisons. Mizoram, on the other hand, is run by the Mizo National Front, a regional political party. There is tremendous public sympathy and generosity. Mizoram hosts more than 50,000 refugees at the moment. There are large numbers in camps and a equally large number of relief organizations helping them with the resources. Contrary to Manipur, in Mizoram, the girl children, the women, the children, the state here has invested a lot in education. The state shares a 400-kilometer border with Myanmar. It's allowed many refugees to enter, and the people in the adjoining villages have even provided them with warm food, shelter, and clothes. The Myanmarese children are also enrolled in these schools. In fact, Mizoram, towards the end of 2021, had instructed all district education officers to admit the children of the Myanmar refugees in state-run schools on humanitarian grounds. There are nearly 400 children of Myanmar refugees who fall in the age group of 6 to 14 years. Most of them are in the Champai and the Aizawl districts. They will be admitted to government schools. The Mizoram Education Minister has assured this. But more than that, and very much importantly linked to this, is access to healthcare, which the women here definitely do not have. We got access to this very small village clinic in More. It's been run by these two young doctors. The lady there is again a refugee herself. And she quietly took us around and showed us that since we know that there are Myanmarese refugees, and particularly women who need medical health, who need mental health support, who need so much of healthcare, who need counseling for all the SGBV that they have faced, but they don't get to go there. And so they are running this little 2-room clinic within which quietly, surreptitiously, Myanmarese refugees come in, women come in, and they avail of whatever little limited medical aid that they can get. Myanmarese refugees in New Delhi, however, which is the capital city, they have different needs. There is a complete different layering in the vocabulary when we talk of the refugee women in New Delhi. They ask for the rights here because the UNHCR office is also situated here. You're talking about North India, you're talking about the capital city. Because on the other hand, in Manipur and Mizoram, for the women, it is a fight for survival. I myself went and lived with the refugee community in these little lanes of West Delhi where the urban refugees kind of are ghettoed. And this is Sitapuri, Budela, and that Uttam Nagar, which is the area where most of the Myanmarese refugees live. We met Nupari. She is known as the Big Mom, the older woman. She has been a Myanmarese refugee woman who's been here for 10 years now. As you can see, the calendar on her wall talks to you about Indian holidays and Myanmarese holidays. She's like the big mom for all the refugee women there. She runs a little tea stall. She used to have a flourishing home, lands, business, everything way back in Myanmar. But here, she lives a life of quiet ignominy. She doesn't want any spotlight to fall on herself. But she's known as someone who's always there to give others help and support. And she knows everybody in the colonies, and she takes care of them like the elder mother. That's Cynthia for you, who has just come in 2 years ago, a single mother with 3 children, who used to teach in the international schools in Yangon, and she knows English, and she led a flourishing life. But here she is, living in a single room, cramped up on one of the terraces in West Delhi, feeding us heartily a lovely Burmese meal, and just simply begging us that I just want the Indian government, I want NGOs, I want the international protection regime to come and just take care of my children. If you've noticed, Cynthia always walks around in t-shirts and pants in male attire, because she says that she has been at the receiving end of such kind of bad things with all the men in the area, that she tries to just, kind of show that, she's more masculine and she can take care of herself, and she takes a rucksack, and that's how she moves around in that area. She dare not show the more feminine side of herself. But the story that I'm going to end my presentation here today is the one about detention. In Manipur, sadly, there are many women, children, infants who are stuck in what we call detention camps. And they in Manipur have been termed as Sadbhavna Mandaps. Here is one of those in Churachandpur in Manipur. On January 19th this year, our research team gained access and went inside such a Sadbhavna Mandap, or a detention center in Churachandpur for Myanmarese refugees. T. Tang Tuam, whom the RT met at the Zurich office in Churachandpur, which is situated in the same compound as the Sadbhavna Mandap, told us that they were chiefly in charge of distributing supplies to various primary medical centers and food and clothing to people affected by disasters. And so the first person we spoke to was him, because he said they try to take some of the amount of those resources and try and give it to these Myanmarese refugees who are kind of held captive in this red building. Now, according to Lian Zalal, a 48-year-old Christian, also the General Secretary of the Zomi Youth Association, who was sitting in this mandap as its caretaker, he said that all the people here actually had been in police custody since April 2021. In the register, they spoke to us that they had 54 detainees, 8 men, 28 women, 8 boys, 8 girls, and 2 infants. When we spoke to them, we found out that there were also 6 unaccompanied minors there, 5 girls and 1 boy, along with 1 person with a disability. There was 1 pregnant woman there also, who had come here last year in December, and she had even delivered a child there. All the inmates had been caught by the police because they did not have any documentation with them, and many could not even speak any comprehensible language. Last year, he added, some of the members living here currently had been even transferred to the central jail in Manipur. The research team, including myself, we were allowed to go inside and meet the inmates together in an FGD in the central hall of the building, where the government has given them looms. Most of these Manipuri and the Myanmarese women, they weave cloth. That is the only way they have some income. And we asked them questions. We were, of course, not allowed to click pictures or record anything. Here are some of my notes from that day. When it comes to shelter, some women stated that they were living here separated from their husbands who were in jail. They all said that they were happy that they had been allowed shelter here, because this situation of being able to live in this building is any day better than the jail premises or being inside any prison. They were allowed to roam around outside the building, but they're not allowed to go outside the main gate to the main road. When it comes to healthcare, they said that there was 1 doctor who was allowed to come and visit them once a month. If there is any emergency, then they are taken to the district hospital at times, if needed also to a private clinic. But we knew that they were saying that because the caretaker was standing above their head. And many of them, from their eyes and then the hidden languages, kind of said that they acutely need medical care and it's not being given to them. Every Saturday, they're being allowed to go to the market for a few hours where they sell their handloom materials and that they weave, and they're allowed to buy food. Sunday church is also allowed. However, many of them said that they were Buddhists, but there were no Buddhist temples nearby that they were allowed to go to. We give the caretaker the assurance that we won't run away, as all our stuff is here. Our relatives are also here. All of them wished that they were given more time to spend outside the building. 5 minors, when it comes to education, 5 minors recently who were brought here from an observational home said that every morning an auto comes and takes them to school, a nearby school named St. Paul's School. Amongst the children, the older ones, however, told us that they were not really interested in studying, right? Now, one of the women, in fact, they confided to us that her younger brother, who's still a minor, is still in the jail in Imphal, and she's very worried about it. I'm very also sad to say that while we did this interviews in January, a couple of weeks later, we found out from the news that few people from this detention center had tried to escape and they had been arrested. And in fact, as a result of this, all the people in this detention center had then been transferred into jail, which, mind you, my dear friends, includes the little children, the inmates, the women, and the underage people, right? So they were all arrested. Here is what they would do to while their time, while in detention. They even gifted us some of these clothes. We had taken them back with us as a memento. And while you and I speak and think about them, they carry on living the vulnerable, precarious lives that they have there. Thank you. That's all from me.
Any questions, Priyanka?
Sincere apologies for the continuous disconnect.
Any questions?
Congratulations, Priyanka, Dr. Priyanka. So
Thank
are
you.
you a social scientist or a home scientist kind of person? That means
I'm a
like
political scientist. I'm a PhD in political science, and my specialization is post-migration studies. I've done my PhD at Jawaharlal Nehru University and a master's at the Refugee Studies Center in Oxford. And I'm heading the Center for Research in Social Sciences and Education at Jain University in Bengaluru, Karnataka.
so you are so long located at a distance from Manipur. So have
Yes.
you been physically there for all this kind of collection of data and working?
Absolutely, ma'am. Absolutely, ma'am. What I'm showing you are all the pictures that I have taken. We spent 2 months in the field. It was a 6-month project, and we spent 2 months in the field.
So your project is actually related to some kind of community work or through
So this is an international project
Okay.
funded by International Protection NGOs of Thailand, Sharp Asia, and ECHO Foundation, where we are trying to map the protection needs of the Myanmarese refugees who are coming into India.
So, my last question to you, very short one. I'm so sorry, but it's inquisitiveness because I had been to Velamor, some Chennai college. It's an engineering girls' college.
Yes, ma'am.
It was in 2012. I went with my colleague in some English language teaching workshop, and what I found the pathetic situation of girls. Like here we are saying that these women are quite satisfied living in such kind of lodging. At least they are getting some kind of food and lodging comfortably in some kind premises where they are feeling some zone of comfort. But when I went to some Vellore College of Chennai, I found that we were asked to accommodate ourselves in that hostel of girls.
Yeah.
And we had beddings of cotton made and quilts, and they were all stinking. And we just asked that how could these girls stay in such kind of things. They said that they are so much afraid of their seniors, of their bullying and ragging, that they don't want to go out at night.
Yeah.
There's such kind of fear within the girls' premises is
Yes.
there existing. So what about the outside world? So I think, have you ever thought, after doing all this kind of research and projection that you have given to us, Have you ever been there for any help as a helpline? You have been there?
Yes, ma'am. That is the whole idea behind the report, that we create a document where we bring about the advocacy needs and we take them back to the funding community, to the funders and to the international NGOs, so that we are able to bring in funds to the areas where the people need it. Absolutely.
Really grateful from your part.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jayashree ma'am.